What did the San Jose Sharks and Columbus Blue Jackets have in common? Not much. Neither has won a Stanley Cup, both are terrible, and one of them could win the draft lottery this year. Yet both of these teams are connected in one way. One franchise that had more rebrands than playoff appearances was the predecessor for professional hockey in both the Bay Area and Ohio. That team was the San Francisco / California / Oakland / Bay Area Seals / California Golden Seals / Cleveland Barons. Whew. Play the intro. I think you all know this by now, but for those who don't, in 1967, the National Hockey League doubled its size from 6 teams to 12. One of those teams was the San Francisco Seals. Wait, scratch that, the California Seals. Before it started, if this were the 1960s, would you go to California for the beaches or hockey? Similar to the results of this survey, most Californians weren't hockey fans in the late 60s. The only reason the NHL expanded to California was because of a TV deal with CBS. That's how we got the Los Angeles Kings and the California Seals. The Seals, who merged from the WHL to the NHL, were predicted to be the best team in the West Division, made up of only expansion teams. Did I say California? I mean the Oakland Seals would let everyone down and finish as the worst team in the league. First off, why did they change to Oakland? Well, fans from San Francisco were hesitant to traveling across the bridge to Oakland for games. The only reason the Seals are in Oakland is because the NHL didn't approve the Cow Palace as a suitable arena in San Francisco. So the Seals had to go across the bay to the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum Arena. That's a mouthful. The name change came only a month into the season in November. Anyway, the Seals underperformed. Massively. There were already offers to move the Seals to places like Vancouver and Buffalo. Both were rejected by the NHL in order to keep the TV deal, and eventually, both cities got expansion teams in 1970. New ownership would buy the team, keeping them in California. Meanwhile, the Seals massively improved in their second season. The Seals rose from dead last to second in the West behind the Blues. Oakland was going to the playoffs. In the first round, the Seals matched up with the Kings in the Battle of California. It was a close series. Oakland even had a 3-2 series lead, but they lost games 6 and 7 to be knocked out by their cross-state rival. Oakland had a weaker record the next season, but was able to sneak into the playoffs. This time, they were swept by the Penguins. Despite the Seals bouncing back, there were problems off the ice. Again. The Seals bounced between several owners during the 69-70 season until they found a buyer right before the 70-71 season. Charles Finley, the infamous owner of the Oakland Athletics. It was time for a change. Only a few games into the season, they were known as the Bay Area Seals. Then on October 16th, Finley renamed the team to the California Golden Seals. For those counting, that's 3 name changes, 5 if you include San Francisco and Bay Area Seals. In addition to the new name, Finley changed the colors from green and blue to Kelly green and gold, just like the A's. What's a good idea? White skates! Yeah, that totally won't look like figure skaters at all. Apparently it was because the A's wore white cleats. Finley was also weird with his money. One time after a game, Finley gave all of his players $100 to go to Gucci, which none of the players knew what Gucci was. Speaking of weird business decisions, Finley bought everyone these bright green suitcases, which head coach at the time Fred Glover refused to use. Notice how I haven't talked about the team on the ice. Well, I wouldn't look there. The Golden Seals massively regressed to a 20-53-5 record. But at least they have the first overall pick, right? They traded it to the Montreal Canadiens. It became Guy Lafleur. Wonderful. California was a bit better the next year and only finished a few points out of a playoff spot. It seemed like the Seals were on the right track. But then came the WHA. The World Hockey Association was a rival league that started in the 70s. The WHA's main way of getting players was poaching players on NHL rosters, and the Golden Seals were the hardest hit team. Finley refused to match contracts, causing 9 players, including 5 of their top goal scorers, to jump ship to the WHA. It would hurt the Seals as they finished with a 16, 46, and 16 record, sending them to the bottom of the league, again. If you thought this season was bad, the next season was worse. 13 wins, 55 losses, and 10 ties. The Golden Seals were nothing but fool's gold. Off the ice, there was finally good news for once. Finley was tired of continued frustration. In 1973, Finley had a plan to sell the Golden Seals to a group from Indianapolis who would move the team to Indiana. Except the NHL rejected it. In January of 1974, the NHL, yes, the National Hockey League, took control of the Golden Seals from Finley. The next season, the Seals got black skates back and new teal uniforms. The Seals were still terrible. There were reports in 1975 that the NHL would move the Seals to Denver as part of some switcheroo that also had the Penguins move to Seattle. Except it fell through. The Seals remained in California. But they finally found a new owner during the offseason. San Francisco hotel owner Mel Swig led an ownership group that bought the Seals. Swig was friends with San Francisco Mayor Joe Oliato and was confident a new arena would be built in San Francisco to keep the team in the Bay Area. However, in 1976, a new mayor was elected. Replacing Oliato was George Moscone. Moscone held a new election to decide on the arena. The vote failed 13-3. There wasn't a backup plan. The Seals were moving. Where would they move to? Cleveland. Cleveland wasn't a stranger to hockey. During the Great Depression, both the Montreal Maroons and the Canadiens were in financial trouble, and each was on the verge of moving to Cleveland at one point. The St. Louis Eagles also considered Cleveland as a place to move before they contracted after one season. Cleveland was known for their historic American Hockey League team, the Cleveland Barons. In 1952, the Barons almost joined the NHL but were stopped due to financial problems. Hope you like the name Barons, because that's the name they chose. More recently, Cleveland had a team in the WHA called the Cleveland Crusaders. The Crusaders had made the playoffs a few times and even won a series, but that was it. Attendance was kinda shaky, hovering between 5,000 to 600 fans a game. The Crusaders had stagnated in the last two seasons. With news of the Seals moving to Cleveland, the Crusaders were being forced out. Originally, there was a plan to move them to Florida, but it fell through. Instead, the Crusaders were shipped to Minnesota. Remember how the Coliseum Arena was in Oakland instead of San Francisco? At least that's driving distance. Richfield Coliseum was not an ideal place. The Coliseum was half an hour away from Cleveland, and there was only one way to get there. That wasn't the only issue. While the relocation was announced in July, it wasn't officially approved until late August. The season started in less than 2 months. Little was done to advertise Cleveland's new NHL team, and it showed. Attendance was dreadful. In an arena that could hold around 18,500, the Barons were barely averaging 10,000, if at all. Attendance was so dire that the Barons couldn't pay the players or team employees. Fans weren't missing anything on the ice. The Barons were still terrible. It also didn't help that they were in a division with the Bruins, Sabres, and Maple Leafs. The Barons should have dissolved at the end of the season, but thanks to Alan Eagleson, the head of the NHL Players Association, they were saved. Mel Swig sold the team to minority owners George and Gordon Gunn. The Barons had a chance at a wildcard spot the next year. Attendance had gone up for certain games against teams like the Canadiens and Flyers. Despite this, the Barons would implode, taking them out of the playoff race. If you could have guessed by now, there were problems off the ice. The Guns' attempt to save the Barons had been proven futile. The owner of the WHA's Arrows offered to buy the Barons and move them to Houston, but nothing went through. Meanwhile in Minnesota, the North Stars ownership had their own financial problems. Both teams talked about a merger plan. On June 14th, the Barons were officially absorbed into the North Stars franchise. The Seals/Barons franchise was officially dead. This was the last time a team in the major North American sports was contracted, not including Major League Soccer. I talked about the North Stars in a previous video, so watch that to learn what happened. Meanwhile in Northern California, there was an itch to get the NHL back in the Bay Area. After a plan to move the North Stars failed, the NHL granted them an expansion team. This team wasn't the Seals, but the Sharks. As part of the expansion, 16 players were sent from Minnesota to San Jose. In a way, the Sharks still have the Seals in their roots. San Jose became a dominant team on the ice, making the playoffs often, something the Seals never did. In 2016, they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final. In the final, the Sharks faced the Pittsburgh Penguins. Unfortunately, the Sharks were outfoxed and overmatched in 6 games. San Jose would make the playoffs a few more times but fell short in all attempts. I made a video covering their most recent playoff appearance. Today, the Sharks are terrible, a mess that will take years to fix. It will be a while before we see San Jose in the playoffs again. But what about Ohio? Stop laughing. Thanks to the support of the ECHL's Columbus Chill, Ohio was in the mix for an expansion team in 1997. It wouldn't be Cleveland receiving the team or Cincinnati, but Columbus. And they weren't the Barons, but the Blue Jackets. The Jackets haven't been as successful as the Sharks. Their first playoff appearance wasn't until 2009, where they were swept by the Red Wings. Columbus would make the playoffs a few times, but were knocked out of the first round both times. In 2019, it seemed like the same ending, but it wasn't. The Blue Jackets pulled off an upset with a sweep over the 62-win Lightning to win a playoff series for the first time in franchise history. They would be knocked out by the Bruins in the second round. The Jackets made the playoffs in the bubble and even won in the qualifying round against the Maple Leafs. The Lightning would get revenge in the first round. That was the last time CBJ made the playoffs. But there's a reason why Columbus is labeled as the least successful franchise in the NHL. The Blue Jackets haven't been the same since going all in 2019. Even with Patrick Laine and Johnny Gaudreau, Columbus has gone nowhere. It might be a while until we see the Jackets become relevant again. Both the Sharks and Blue Jackets don't realize they are both connected, all because of the Seals' ineptitude and the Barons' misfortune. Would the Bay Area have a team if it wasn't for the Seals? Would the NHL go to Ohio if the Barons never played in Cleveland for 2 years? We'll never know. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I recommend reading The California Golden Seals, A Tale of White Skates, Red Ink, and one of the NHL's most outlandish teams by Steve Currier for more information on the Seals and Barons. I'll see you in the next video.